April 17th, 1874. She would remember the date for the rest of her life. She did not know it that morning, did not know that when the sun climbed over Willow Bend and warmed the dust along the road, it was warming the last day she would ever feel whole. She did not know that when Elias Crowley rode away, the waiting would stretch into 12 long, unforgiving years, and the frontier would never let him return. Margaret Hale stood beside the cottonwood tree with her hands clenched in her dress, trying to memorize the way he looked in the light, the way his hat cast a shadow across his eyes, the way his mouth curved into a smile meant only for her. Elias reached for her, and when his hands cupped her face, she felt the tremor in his fingers. He was afraid, though he tried to hide it, and she loved him more for that. "It won't be long," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "1 season, maybe 2. Just long enough to earn something better than scraped hands and borrowed time." Margaret nodded even as her chest tightened and told him she would wait, because if she said anything else she might beg him to stay, and loving him meant letting him go. He pressed his forehead to hers like a promise sealed in breath and bone, like a man trying to anchor himself before the current carried him away. When he kissed her, it was slow and aching, as if he already knew the road would change him, as if he feared this moment might have to last a lifetime. Then he mounted his horse. Margaret watched him ride until the sound of hooves faded, until the road curved and swallowed him whole. The dust settled. The silence screamed. Something inside her broke so quietly she almost missed it. Behind her, Willow Bend carried on, doors opening, laughter rising, a wagon rattling past, life refusing to stop for her grief. Margaret stayed where she was, staring at the empty road, waiting for the impossible moment when he would turn back. He didn't. That night, alone in her room, she told herself this was not goodbye. It was only waiting, not yet knowing that the frontier does not return what it takes, and that love sometimes survives long after hope is gone. The first letter arrived like mercy. Margaret recognized Elias's handwriting before she saw his name, the uneven slant of the letters making her hands shake so badly she nearly tore the paper trying to open it. She pressed it to her chest first, breathing as if the page might still be warm from his hands, then read it by lamplight, tears blurring the words. He wrote about the road, about aching muscles and endless skies, about missing her voice so much it hurt to sleep. He wrote that every mile he traveled was only taking him farther, so he could one day come back whole. Margaret answered that letter the same night, her words spilling out faster than the ink could dry, telling him she was still there, still waiting, still believing. She folded each letter carefully and kept them beneath her pillow, where his words stayed close to her heart even while he was gone. More letters came, and she built her life around them. She woke each morning hoping the post rider would appear. She counted time by envelopes instead of days. When one arrived, the world felt bearable again. When it didn't, the hours stretched thin and sharp. Elias wrote about moving farther west, about work that never seemed to end, about danger spoken of only in half-finished sentences. Still, every letter ended with a promise. "I'm coming home." Margaret held on to those words like they were a lifeline, reading them until the paper softened and the ink began to fade. Then the letters began to slow. Weeks passed, then months. When one finally arrived, it felt heavier, like it had traveled through sorrow to reach her. His words were fewer, his tone tired. Margaret felt the distance growing, felt the frontier stretching itself between them like something alive. Every evening, she walked to the edge of Willow Bend and watched the road until the sun sank low and the sky burned red, imagining his shape on the horizon, telling herself that tomorrow would be the day. And then the letters stopped. The silence hollowed her out. Days passed with no word, then seasons. People tried to be gentle. They told her the West changes men. They told her no news was usually bad news. They told her she was wasting her youth on a ghost. Margaret nodded, thanked them, and went on waiting. She folded Elias's last letter until it was thin as cloth. She set a place for him at the table long after she stopped believing he would walk through the door. She slept on one side of the bed and left the other untouched, as if the space itself might call him home. Some nights the loneliness crushed her so completely she could barely breathe. She cried into her pillow until dawn, whispering his name like a prayer she refused to stop believing in. Waiting became her life. Love became endurance. And still, every sunset found her standing by the road, staring into the distance, believing that if she stopped waiting, she might lose him forever. 12 years had passed, and Willow Bend had changed in ways that made Margaret's heart ache even more. The streets had grown wider, the buildings taller, and yet nothing had filled the emptiness left by Elias's absence. Every wrinkle on her hands, every silver strand in her hair, carried the weight of hope stretched thin by time. She had grown strong in ways the townsfolk admired, running her small mercantile with steady hands, greeting customers with a practiced smile, yet inside, the ache never faded. Every evening, she walked to the edge of town, to the same cottonwood tree where she had kissed him goodbye, staring at the road as if sheer will could make him appear over the horizon. She slept with one side of the bed untouched, set a place for him at dinner, and whispered his name to the wind at night. Some nights the sorrow felt unbearable, pressing her chest until she could hardly breathe. Tears soaked her pillow more than she would ever admit, and yet she refused to give up. Love, she believed, was endurance, and she was determined to endure even as time gnawed at her hope. She imagined him riding back, hat tipped low, weary from the trials of the West, a shadow against the sunset, and each imagined reunion strengthened her resolve. 12 years of waiting had carved patience into her bones, but it had not hardened her heart. She still laughed when a story amused her, still cried at the sight of beauty, and still held the memory of Elias like a secret fire inside her chest. Friends suggested she move on, that she find a new life, a new love, a new dream. She smiled politely and carried on waiting. In the quiet hours before dawn, she whispered to herself that hope was not foolish, that love did not abandon its promise simply because the frontier demanded its toll. And still, each evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, Margaret stood by the road, eyes fixed on the horizon, willing it to deliver him to her. 12 years of letters, silence, and longing had made her strong, but every heartbeat still throbbed with the ache of absence. She had learned that love could endure the cruelty of time and the merciless sweep of the West, and in that enduring, she found a bittersweet strength, the knowledge that some hearts are worth waiting for, no matter the cost. 12 years had passed since Elias left Willow Bend, and Margaret Hale had spent every one of them standing by the cottonwood tree, waiting, hoping, remembering. One late afternoon, a stranger rode into town on a tired horse, carrying a worn saddle that she recognized immediately. Her heart skipped, throbbed, then broke in a rhythm she had long grown used to. The stranger dismounted and approached her, removing his hat. In his hands was a journal, bound in cracked leather, the name Elias Crowley etched faintly on the cover. Margaret's hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped it. She knew before she read a word. The journal told of a man stretched too thin by the West. Elias had survived fever, cave-ins, cattle drives lost to floods, and skirmishes with outlaws he never sought. Every day he had thought of her. Every night he had longed for home. Letters he had sent never arrived, swallowed by storms, rivers, or hands that never delivered them. The frontier had tested him in ways no one could survive without losing pieces of themselves. He had died carrying her name on his lips, asking the stranger to bring his final words to the woman who had waited. Margaret opened the journal beneath the cottonwood tree as the sun fell behind the mountains. Each page was heavy with his love, his longing, his pain. She read the words he had written for her eyes alone, letters she would never receive in time, words that revealed the depth of his devotion, the endlessness of his hope, the sacrifices he had made just to reach her in spirit. Her tears fell onto the pages, soaking the ink, blending her grief with his. The ache in her chest was unbearable, a fire that would not die. She cried aloud, her sobs echoing across the quiet plains. She wanted to curse the frontier, to scream at the world for taking him from her, but all she could do was hold the journal, clutch it to her heart, and weep. Elias had never forgotten her. He had never chosen the West over her. It had simply never released him. Margaret pressed the leather to her chest, feeling his presence in every line, every scratch of ink. She whispered his name into the wind, hoping it would carry to wherever he had gone, wherever he had waited, wherever he had loved her until the last breath of his life. And in Willow Bend, long after the sun disappeared and the cottonwood leaves rustled in the evening breeze, people said if you listened closely, you could hear a man riding home, and a woman finally letting herself cry, the sound of love enduring even when the frontier would not.